You better have something other than, come on, no way, how could you say such a crazy thing? Make an argument this time.
You literally just said, by giving each person a vote, it makes us less free.
Yes.
WTF.
I don't think
the
that
masses
knowing those
don't
things
know.
is necessary for being able to have an opinion on something, right? Like,
Well, you can have an
absolutely
opinion, but your opinion is garbage if it's completely uninformed. And I don't want those people running the country and making decisions. You don't even have people to choose from who actually represent the average person's worldview. You have to be
you
rich.
Vote for Trump?
I did, but only because my husband told me to, and to cancel the vote of a feminist somewhere.
Cool, bro.
So the next topic is universal suffrage destroyed America.
So, okay. How so?
How's that? Well,
Yeah, how so?
the country that we live in now is almost nothing like the American founding. I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think the final nail in the coffin was the idea that we are a democracy, that there should be universal suffrage, one person, one vote, right? Because that's not the way that the founders framed the Constitution or set up, the government. So everything from the three branches to, states having sovereignty and things like that was completely destroyed and wiped out by granting one person, one vote. So now we have to deal with all kinds of problems like, people voting who shouldn't, who aren't citizens, or things like the welfare state blowing up. You would have never had this giant nanny state, welfare state that we have now, which is ironically making everyone far less free. So it's a country that was, founded on the basis of liberation, and by giving each person a vote, we've actually made it far less free, and people have a lot less liberty than they used to.
So would you say that the America that we have is less representative of the electorate than it was previously?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons I think that's the case is when you have this giant machine, we've had a lot of, with elections, we've had a lot of contests and things like that, even since 2000, right? With the hanging chads, with Gore and Bush. Everybody's always disputing the outcome and saying things weren't counted correctly. It's because we have 300 million people in this country. I think, roughly 100 million of them can vote. 300 million people, about 100 million or so are qualified to vote. What that does is provides massive amount of room for a giant shadow oligarchy, this deep state bureaucracy. It basically just makes such a giant machine out of the government that you really don't know who you're electing, and they're not going and doing what they were supposed to do.
I completely agree. The
Yeah.
government's too big. But the question was is it more representative of the electorate?
I don't think it is at all. No.
How can that be the case if more of the electorate is putting input? I agree. The country's in the shitter. That's not the question. The question is, it seems to be that a lot of people who have bad ideas are able to express those ideas.
Yes.
So that's a bad thing that people should be able to express their ideas? Or
No,
it's a bad
it's not
thing
that.
we, as people who disagree with those things, are not able to properly fight those ideas.
Well, once we instituted universal suffrage and everybody over a certain age can just vote, there's no other requirement. You don't have to have any skin in the game. What happens is the people who are the takers can vote to take from the people who are the doers. You have things now like giant political action committees that have, millions, even billions of dollars in funding. I think the last U.S. presidential campaign was one of the most expensive in history. Billions of dollars of money coming from corporations and all kinds of political action groups. Yeah. So what happens is you're voting for what somebody is campaigning on, and then they get into office and they don't actually do any of that. And all you have to choose from is this shit sandwich or this other shit sandwich. So there's really, as a Christian, more traditional patriarchist woman in this country, I don't feel we have anybody who represents my views, right? There's nobody for me to choose from. And I think a lot of people are in that boat. We're stuck with this crony capitalist right-left dialectic corporate bullshit, basically. So I don't think that the government we have represents the average person. I mean, if you look at...
I agree, but that wasn't the question. So the question...
You asked me if I thought the electorate was being represented, and I don't.
The context being, if you're saying America was better before, when only landowners could vote, I'm not disagreeing with that statement, but the clear conclusion if more people started to vote and then we went away from that. Then right now the government is representing what the people actually want, and when those people couldn't vote, we had a better America, which could be debated.
But do you think the people who are being elected are actually representing the electorate?
That's a different question.
No, that's what you asked me. You said, is the electorate being represented by those who are elected? And my answer is no. Because you don't even have people to choose from who actually represent the average person's worldview. You have to be rich.
Vote for Trump?
I did, but only because my husband told me to, and to cancel the vote of a feminist somewhere.
Cool, bro.
So this is what we have to choose from. And I think almost everybody on both sides of the aisle.
Everybody who doesn't agree with me should not get to talk.
No, absolutely not. I'm
when
saying
it should
that
be my ideas are better, so everybody should get to talk, and I will win.
No, my ideas are not better. Nobody should listen to me.
Then
Nobody should vote for me.
Talking to you?
Because I'm saying, we're here discussing and debating. I'm not supposed to be in charge. I'm not supposed to be running the country. You better have something other than, come on, no way. How could you say such a crazy thing? Make an argument this time.
You literally just said, by giving each person a vote, it makes us less free.
Yes.
WTF.
I can demonstrate it.
Okay.
So under King George, colonists paid roughly 4% of what they made in taxes. Do you know what people pay now? We have the bottom half of people who don't pay income tax, but they pay sales tax, cigarette tax, gasoline tax. And if you do make any money, God forbid, people who are wealthy are now paying, 60, 70%, 30% tax. You pay your state taxes, your local taxes, your federal taxes, consumer taxes, right? How are we more free?
No, that's
under universal suffrage.
No, your claim is that we're less free.
Yes.
How's that even what does that have anything to do with what you just said?
Well, like I said, in the colonies, when we did not have universal suffrage, or in early America prior to 1920, we paid less in taxes. You keep more of your own money. That's a major tenet of freedom in and of itself. We were not subject to this giant political machine where you don't even get to vote for people who you actually think represent you. You're voting for people that are rich and wealthy and can get campaign funding from giant special interest groups, and that's all you have to choose from. So you're not even able to send somebody who's going. It used to be the case that when you went to Congress, you had a full-time job and you were only there for a small amount of the year, and you were there to do what the people sent you and told you to do. Now, these are career politicians that are somehow making tens of millions of dollars aside from their salary in Congress.
How does that make us less free? What does this have to do with anything?
I just explained to you how it makes us less free. Number one, you don't get to even choose from candidates who actually represent you. You choose from candidates who represent special interest groups and corporations. That's a major problem for freedom.
What corporation chose Trump to be the president?
You could just look at his giant list of donors from political action committees and you'll know exactly.
Which corporation?
So it's probably BlackRock. It's probably Google. Yes, all of them.
So all of us, anyone here who voted for Trump, we were just shills for BlackRock?
I didn't say we were shills. It's not absurd.
What does BlackRock have to do with anything?
Listen, sir, you can't just appeal to incredulity and call that an argument. Just saying it's absurd, I don't believe it, I'm not convinced is not an argument. You give me an argument.
BlackRock is not an argument. We all voted for who we wanted to be president.
So you think that...
So what is BlackRock? You brought up BlackRock, so don't leave this topic. What does BlackRock have to do with anything?
So they are a transnational corporation. They have no American loyalty whatsoever. They're not doing anything for the American people. They're buying up residential properties.
What does that have to do with who's president?
Everything. It has every... Okay, I'm going to be the incredulous one now. Dude, what the fuck? How can you say that? Like, duh. It's yes, of course, everybody knows that giant corporate interests are not representing the little guy. So if what you care about is individual freedom, ironically, by granting universal suffrage, what you do is create the system we have now, which makes people less free. It does not do anything to represent the average person.
How many votes does BlackRock have?
It doesn't matter it doesn't matter if they're controlling everything. If these giant transnational corporations
have who I voted for.
What do you mean?
You saying that BlackRock has some influence over who became president.
Yeah, they have complete. So AIPAC, you don't think AIPAC has any influence?
I've never even heard of AIPAC, and so how could they possibly influence
Your
me.
ignorance is a very great argument on my behalf. You as a voter have no idea what the hell you're voting for. You don't know how the system works. You don't know where the funding is coming from for the people who you're voting for. And so you don't even know. You as a voter are so ignorant that you don't even understand who you're voting for and what they're going to do, and that the promises they make are not to you, the voter. The promises they make are to AIPAC, BlackRock, Google, Silicon Valley, to everyone but you. How could you ever say that you're more free? How could you say that this is a land of liberty when you don't even understand how the system works?
What do you mean I don't understand how the system works? You seem to imply that the people that I haven't heard of somehow have some mind control over who I voted for.
Yes, sir. It's called propaganda. You don't understand what you're even voting for. How are you able to advocate for yourself in a system where it makes absolute sense? It's just that you are too dull to understand it.
I'm too dull.
Yes, sir, you are.
You gotta be kidding.
So if you want to understand how the system works, you should probably go home and do a little bit of reading and find out what's happening in America.
Tell me what should I read besides
go to anyone's campaign website that you're thinking of voting for. Look up their list of donors. Find out what their donors do, what businesses they're in, who they're doing business with. And then you'll understand why they're lobbying for what they're lobbying for and why they're funding who they're funding. And then you'll know what you're actually voting for.
Sure.
Hello.
Hello. So, repeat the question for me.
Universal suffrage destroyed America.
Well, what is universal suffrage?
That means everybody over a certain age gets to vote regardless of any other factors.
At a certain age.
Yeah, I think it's 21, right?
So why is it 21?
I don't know why it's 21, but everybody who's 21 gets to vote. Apparently, that's the arbitrary age that they decided you should have a say in how things are governed.
Okay, and, well, like, where do I even begin? Universal suffrage. Who came up with that term?
Doesn't matter who came up with the term, but I can tell you what the term means. The term just means universal, meaning everybody.
Yes.
Suffrage means voting. It just means everybody can vote. It used to be that there were more qualifications that you would need depending on where you were. You may have a lot of places it was older. It was more like 27. They didn't think that you maybe had such good judgment as far as governance until you were a little bit older, more established. You may have to be a property owner. You may have to pay a polling tax. Some places you had to be a certain religion, things like that.
Okay, so that could be manipulated, and they're trying to prevent that?
That's the selling point, yes.
That's the selling point. So someone's trying to profit off of that.
I think it sounds good to say everybody should have a say. I think that's it has broad appeal. On its face, it sounds logical and it sounds really nice. Like we all get a say. Everybody gets to decide what happens to our country. What I'm saying is that universal suffrage, ironically, does not do that. It does the opposite. It provides cover for these giant entities to come in and fund things, special interest groups, lobbying groups. And you end up with a giant political machine where you don't really know who's behind what you're voting for, how the policy is written. Most people don't even understand how the American government works. So to have all of those people just voting based on propaganda campaigns, ads that are run on TV, you'll hear women say things like, oh, I vote for Democrats because they care about the poor. And they really think that that's what they're voting for, when in reality, that's not what they're getting at all.
So why does society allow that to take place, to even occur?
Well, society allows it because, like I said, it sounds good. They think, oh, good, I'm going to get to have a say in how my country is governed. The people at the top who proposed this, the people who pushed universal suffrage, did it obviously because they understood, hey, we can open up a lot of doors to lobbying groups. We can lobby for special interests. We can gain a lot of power in ways that we normally wouldn't, because we can use the media to run giant propaganda campaigns, get our guy in, and then from there we can kind of run things. So this is why you have, lifelong crony government people like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell making $59 million a year in Congress, which their salary is what, $200,000, something like that. And it's because they're taking all this money from special interests and corporations and business partners, and then they go to Congress and vote based on what these people want, not on what you and I want.
Okay, so this problematic issue has occurred because of the fundamental foundation of this nation not foreknown by the forefathers.
No, the forefathers didn't set up this country to have universal suffrage at all. It was supposed to be a much smaller representative republic where you did not have people who were in government forever. It might be like an upstanding guy from your area. Say you live in Pennsylvania in a small town, and there's a man that everybody there has decided should run. They support him. He gets elected. He goes to Congress part-time for a couple months out of the year. He comes back home and he still has to run a business, run his farm, take care of his family. And there weren't all these giant special interest and lobbying groups. So it was completely different prior to universal suffrage. And that's the thing that opened the floodgates to this absolutely diabolical machine that we have now.
Now, also, the religion aspect, the church, with Christianity, also is the blame itself, or partial blame, to even allow this, not to safeguard or protect the nation from these individuals or groups of individuals.
Well, I mean, the people who thought that was if you're talking about the church, that would be Protestants for the most part. Roman Catholics and Orthodox tend to be more monarchical. We are not necessarily people who are huge on democracy. It's kind of changed a bit in the modern age, but back then when the country was founded, it was an extension of the Protestant Reformation, which is just another revolution, really.
Okay, so what's going to be the salvation to this problem?
I don't know what the answer to that question is. I don't know if anybody does.
Understood.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
So it sounds like a big part of the problem for this is it seems like you're worried about who is like controlling the vote essentially in the propaganda.
Yeah.
How is that connected to universal suffrage though?
Right. So without universal suffrage, if you had a much smaller voting pool, this didn't really work. And the reason why a lot of people in Congress wanted to push universal suffrage is because then once you have this huge voting block, everybody gets to vote. Every person out there, whether they know about the issues, whether they understand how the government works, they could be completely ignorant, they still get to vote. What this creates is an electorate that can be easily propagandized. So it just becomes a popularity contest, right? So like famously, John F. Kennedy was elected not necessarily because he had the best campaign or the best ideas, but because he participated in one of the first televised debates. And Richard Nixon looked very sweaty and very nervous. He wasn't as attractive. He wasn't as good looking. John F. Kennedy's younger. He's good looking. He's tan. He wore some face powder so he didn't look shiny. So now what most people vote on is just, I think this guy's mean. Or like women, for instance, notoriously won't vote for short men or bald men. So it becomes not about the ideas and not about who's most qualified to govern. It becomes about it's like a pop culture thing, right?
So I hear what you're saying, and interestingly, I agree with there being problems as far as not having certain individuals that fully align with our beliefs to vote for, right? Like that's kind of hard with the whole bipartisan situation we're in.
Yeah.
I don't see how universal suffrage is the problem behind that, though. I would look at something, and I'm not trying to pivot off the topic too much, but like I would look at situations like something like the Electoral College, or just the way we do like first to the post voting systems, right? Like those seem to me like better ways to solve the problem rather than revoking people's rights. And I feel you run into a lot of issues with like, okay, well, who do we get to decide who votes, right? Like what ethics system do we go with?
Well, that's the thing is like, how would we restrict suffrage? And I think there's a number of ways you could do it. You could say 1 vote per household. You could go with property owners. You could go with net taxpayers and say, hey, if you're taking more from the system than you're gaining, maybe you shouldn't vote. There's a lot of ethical problems, and you'd have to sort that out. That's a problem for the men to figure out, I would say. But the problem that we have now is that none of the problems will go away if we have the majority of voters who are completely ignorant. Like I would say, if you polled people at a polling station, the number of people who could tell you what are the 3 branches of the federal government, what do they do, how is a bill written, how is it passed, what's the process, what does impeachment mean, like the basics of high school government class.
I don't think that knowing those things is necessary for being able to have an opinion on something, right? Like,
well, you can have an
absolutely
opinion, but your opinion is garbage if it's completely uninformed. And I don't want those people running the country and making decisions. So, for example, if you don't understand how immigration works, why should you be voting on immigration policy?
Again, so I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But again, I think that the solution isn't coming down to universal suffrage and like removing rights from certain people to vote. I think that the issues come down to how's our voting system work? How do we remove lobbying from the political space, and how do we educate the electorate better? I don't know that, like, I can agree with you there's a problem. I'm not agreeing with your solution, though.
I think there has to be limits on suffrage. I think one of the limits should be that you should have to take a civics test. You should have to at least know some basics. You should have to have some basic information, because low information voters are just people that are easily propagandized.
So the problem with that, though, is that you very easily now have the potential to have people unable to vote and trapped in poverty because they can't get an education.
I don't think that universal suffrage has done anything to get people out of poverty. I think that more people are trapped in poverty by universal suffrage than would be if we fixed this problem, actually. So there's a reason why people are, the African American community would be the best example of this. They continuously vote for Democrats year after year, decade after decade, and they're no better off. And finally, some of them are starting to catch on to this.
I feel like this is
right?
not on topic, though, right? Because, again, the ultimate point is, what is the solution? I know it's not actually your point, right? You're saying universal suffrage is the problem. But what we've kind of come up on now is that the problem is, how do we essentially remove this corruption from government? How do we actually get the voices of the people accurately reflected in government? And I don't think removing the voices of certain people is the solution. Again, I think that when it comes to education would be a solution. Again, reworking the voting system could be a solution. Fighting against lobbying could be a solution.
But I think that by limiting... Oh, okay.
All right, good talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Both meet and see Rachel Wilson debate in person at DebateCon 6 this fall, November 15th and 16th in Nashville, Tennessee. Grab your tickets at the link in the description box. You don't want to miss it.